Hello again, folks. Steve here, and I have a question for you all, those 5 of you who may watch this. Have you ever been called a conspiracy theorist? I certainly have been. I can remember one case in particular a number of years ago. It was on Facebook. I don't remember what the incident was, but somebody just shot back as, they thought it was pretty wise, I guess. Hey, Steve, that sounds like you are a conspiracy theorist. At which point I challenged the guy a little bit, and surprise, surprise, there was no rebuttal of what I had said. And in fact, I asked him to point out where am I wrong. That's what I notice with people who call others conspiracy theorists. They seem to fall for a few themselves, I would say. Like, for example, Jeffrey Epstein. No, he won't be killed in prison. No, not at all. He's under the protection of the government, after all. Don't they seem to know what they're doing? Well, Jeffrey Epstein apparently committed suicide in prison. Didn't he try to do that a few days ago? And didn't he say that somebody was trying to kill him and all sorts of stuff? But I suppose we shouldn't be worried at all, because apparently the FBI is on the case. They'll get it figured out, right? Yeah, that's the same FBI who... Weren't they involved in a big conspiracy theory over the last couple of years over, Russian collusion? And they spent, $30 million trying to get to the bottom of it all. Oh. Apparently that didn't work out very well now, did it? I don't know. I know it's like beating a dead drum, but of course, those of you who know me know that I don't have a lot of faith in the fantasy called government. I know that the guns are true and all that, but I'm not a big fan of it at all. But why people are surprised when government, here is supposed to be a guy who should have been on suicide watch, and the cameras don't happen to work when he was killed or when he committed suicide, and he's probably supposed to be in a padded room, probably with no rafters above him and so on, but yet he's able to commit suicide. That government, how can people have any faith that government can do anything? Right? That sounds like a completely inept organization. And that's the government that people want to take care of them and educate their children and take care of their health care and all sorts of stuff. If it wasn't true, if we were being told this, it would sound like complete insanity. And yet, yeah, I'm just a conspiracy theorist, I guess. I was listening to Peter Schiff a couple of days ago, and he said something really interesting too, because he was talking about some scandal, of course, ongoing scandal in Puerto Rico, run by a bunch of socialists. So what else is there really, right? And there was some sort of outcry that they want to get rid of one band of socialists and put in another band of socialists, because the current band of socialists, even though they tax the hell out of everybody, they're keeping a little bit for themselves. Somebody was pocketing a little bit of the tax money, shall we say. And his point is, why are you surprised? If you hire a band of thieves to do your stealing for you, which is what people do when they vote for government, right? You're basically giving your consent for a bunch of, officials to go and steal from others to give to you, right? Take taxes and spend them on things that you want them spent on. Well, if that's true, then why are you surprised if they pocket a little bit for themselves? Would you be surprised if you hired a gang of highwaymen to go and rob people by the side of the highway and give it to you, and then you found out that they're actually skimming a little bit off and pocketing it for themselves? No, they're completely corrupt individuals to do that in the beginning. So why would their corruption stop at you? Why would all of a sudden, they're completely corrupt over here, but over here they're supposed to be completely above board? How does that make any sense? It's like the analogy of shit soup, right? You put a little bit of shit in the soup, it's shit soup. You don't want to drink any of it. It's all contaminated. So if somebody is that morally debased to spend most of their time stealing from people, how could that possibly be translated into complete virtue when they're dealing with you? So they're going to be completely immoral. They're going to go and steal from all these people. Then they're going to be completely virtuous on the contract you made for them to give to you. No, they're going to skim some of it off. That's the business they're in. They're in the business of thieving, right? Sure, they made a deal with you to you pay them in some way to do their stealing. But that's not where their stealing stops. And you see this as politicians, the higher up they go or whatever. I mean, they make a couple $100,000 a year, but they end up down the road with hundreds of millions of dollars. How the hell does that work? It's because in the process of you hiring them for a couple of $100,000 to do your stealing for you, they skim a bunch of it off, right? And then how do you expect them to be honorable people? They're in a completely dishonorable position, right? And no surprise. I mean, this Jeffrey Epstein, he was involved with the deep state, obviously, right? I mean, you have some extremely dangerous and highly powerful characters who are associated with him, who are known to be associated with him. You guys like the British royalty, Prince Andrew or whatever. I mean, he's availing himself with Jeffrey Epstein's services, which is pretty much common knowledge by now. It's underage girls. You have guys like Bill Clinton hanging around him. You have these sorts of characters who, every time somebody gets a little too close to them, uncovering some of the dirt on them, they end by committing suicide by shooting themselves several times in the back of the head and stuff like that. I mean, it's very dangerous what people do to themselves after being associated with these people. It's astounding. And I say that with tongue-in-cheek kind of thing, right? So, in these sorts of conversations with myself that I have, I try to find out, because of course, if we dwell on the evils of the world, we can get dragged down. And I find that sometimes with myself. I got to lay off on even focusing on this sorts of stuff. But if there's a lesson in it, right? If there's a lesson that we can learn, then we can turn a negative into a positive in a way. In terms of after the fact, this is what we can learn from it. Many things we can learn from it. So if we mull on this, hear it on the news or whatever, well, what can we learn from it? Well, if you look at the deeper people go into evil, right, which is what democracy is, the deeper and deeper they go into it, and socialism and communism and stuff like that, which if you look at these guys like Epstein and royal family and, the Clintons and all that, they're heavily into the state. That's all they are hunter-gatherers, right, because they don't produce anything. They just graft off of the productive class. What does the royalty ever do, right? They ever work in their life? No, they don't work. They're hunter-gatherers. They got a good trap line that's been working for them well, and they keep on feeding on it, right? So that's where you'll find the greatest evil, where you'll find people who are more free enterprise, where they actually have to please people and they have to make deals and what have you. They are more honest, above board, and what have you, right? And they're dealing more with reality. They're looking up and they're looking within. This is the lesson here, I think, is for us to look in and to look up, rather than look out and look down at what we created. See, things like socialism, communism, democracies and all that, those are all just inventions of man, right? And to look to them to the solution is looking down into hell. And that's the origin, as I can see it, in terms of the corporal, in the moment analogy of heaven versus hell. Hell is downstream of us. Hell is what we create. We create our own hell. We create institutions. We enter those institutions as though they are real, as though they are more real than us. So we start calling ourselves persons rather than man, right? We start calling ourselves our roles and our chessboard chips that we decide we are in our professions and whatever. And we fall into error down there. But if we realize that we're man and we look upstream for answers, we find truth. Because upstream is upstream by, what I mean by up, is looking upstream towards what creates us. Even though we never see it, we get a clearer sense of ourselves because we have to look in to do that in a way. We have to introspect, and we have to meditate, and we have to be honest. We have to commit to be honest with ourselves, And these things that happen, Epstein, think about that. Think about ending your life that way. Whether somebody killed him or whatever, it's still the result of his actions. If he was killed, he was such a hated man because of the heinous things that he was going to release, that even his so-called friends, obviously, that's who would have done it, his so-called friends did him in, right? Think about a life ending like that, and think about that as hell, right? Versus honesty, versus introspection, versus looking up at that which creates us, where we find truth, where we find honesty, where we find reality rather than fantasy. Because now we're admitting what we are. We're man, created. And we believe in freedom. We want freedom for others. We want honesty for ourselves and others. I think that's the lesson here. A little bit convoluted perhaps, but maybe that's the lesson we can take away from the death of Epstein. So, something to think about. Steve here again, great chatting. If you like what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, and share. And yes, I am on the road, but I'll try to post as often as I can. And we'll talk again soon. Bye for now.